Hey guys, welcome once again to the beginner backpacking series where what I'm talking about are things that beginner hikers, beginner backpackers have questions about. And one big question that lots of people have is okay, what kind of shoes do I wear? So I'm going hiking, going backpacking, what do I wear on my feet? And that's a really important question because everyone knows that if you're hiking and backpacking, you're on your feet all day. And that's one of those things that you have to make sure you take care of your feet, because if you don't take care of your feet, then you're going to have really bad problems and you're going to hate backpacking. You're going to hate hiking. You're never going to want to do it again. And so the big question is, what's the best hiking boot? First, I wanted to start by saying that choosing the kind of the right backpacking or hiking shoe for you is really personal. It's something that you kind of have to figure out for yourself. So even as you listen to my journey, I guess, in this video and what I ended up with and what I chose to do, you kind of have to find your own way. You kind of have to figure out for yourself, because honestly, you could hurt yourself by following someone else's advice to the T, to the letter. Our feet are different. It's just kind of how it is. What may feel comfortable for me is probably not going to be exactly comfortable for you. The best hiking boot may not be a boot at all. And we'll kind of talk about what I did first of all. But where I first started is just like anyone else. Is I went to the sporting goods store and I thought to myself, okay, well, I'm a size 12. I'm going to buy a size 12 boot. And I'm going to make sure it's waterproof, watertight, nothing's going to get in. I just want to be able to trump through kind of whatever terrain. It doesn't matter. They're kind of bomb-proof, if you will. So I bought those boots, size 12 exactly, a little narrow for me, but I was like, man, I wore them in the store and they felt good. And so I bought them. And that was my biggest mistake, is buying that boot right away. First of all, they were too narrow for me. I have kind of a wider foot, as well as I went before I had kind of gone through a full day in them. So it was kind of at the beginning of the day I bought them, so my feet weren't swollen enough to really truly try out how they would truly feel on the trail. And my feet hurt in those things. I don't have them anymore because I never wore them, because I hated putting them on. My feet kind of ached even looking at them. So what I did next is we transferred from that boot, and still in the hiking boots theme, and you see my muddy boots here. I have these Salomon Quest 42 boots, and they're Gore-tex. And these boots are phenomenal. I really love them. I would recommend to everyone, but I made the same mistake. I bought size 12, which is what my foot size is normally, and you guys have seen this quite a bit, I think. So I water tested these. I've taken them to the Smokies, and I still wear them to this day. But I'll tell you what, boots are really good at a couple things. I'm going to talk about the pros of buying hiking boots. First of all, you have a lot of ankle support. That's the big thing people tend to think about when they're going hiking or backpacking for the first time, is you need ankle support, you need ankle support. You never really know for sure. That's what people would say, and that's what people tell you. And that's a major pro. Next thing is that it's Gore-tex lined. I mean, typically I can tramp through puddles, I can kind of stomp through whatever I want, and truly, as long as the Gore-tex holds up, I don't have to worry about it. And that's really cool. Also, they tend to have a stiffer sole in the bottom of the boots. That means you tend not to feel as many rocks. You tend not to, your foot doesn't flex, kind of is held kind of rigid in boots. And that's going to be a pro because you don't really feel a whole lot. The cons, of course, is they tend to be heavier. That's a big one. There's some studies out there talking, especially they're quoting an army study, or 1 pound on your feet is kind of the equivalent to 5 pounds on your back. I don't know about that exact number or anything, but I can tell you that I can tell if I wear a heavier boot, for me, I can tell that I get more tired doing that than if I was to wear something like trail runners. Another con as well on this type of boot is that Gore-tex is great for protecting you kind of on, I consider it to be day hike sort of trips, where you know, hey, if your feet get wet, it's not a big deal. If it starts raining, or if water gets over the top of the ankle into the boot, it's not a big deal because you're going to get back to your car, your feet are going to be dried off pretty quickly. It's not a big deal. So boots, the major con is that if they get wet, especially Gore-tex type boots, they tend to stay wet. So that's something to consider. So what I did then is I had these boots and I kind of transitioned. I thought, well, maybe I should try a shoe. A hiking type shoe, of course. And that's where these come into play. These are my Merrill Moab ventilators, and these are very, very popular. I think you see these things all the time because they're kind of a mid between a boot and, see, I chopped off the ankles, or shows the lower ankle model, because I realized I did not like that feeling for my ankle kind of being restricted. I kind of like my foot to be able to move, and these work really well. They're still a little bit heavy compared to a trail runner, but they're kind of a mid-weight option, and they work really well for me. These tend to go with me on day hikes, typically not my really long trips, but my day hikes is where these tend to come into play. And then, in my evolution, I finally transitioned to trail runners. And now the big pro about trail runners is that they're light. I mean, really, really light. Compared to the boots, these are my Salomon Speedcross 3s, and they are about a pound, maybe a little bit over a pound. And so honestly, I feel like I'm walking on air when I get back from a hike, or even when I'm on the hike. I feel like I can do that for a long time. I didn't mention one of the pros of the boots that I showed before is that boots tend to work really well if you have a heavier pack. If you have a heavy pack and you're carrying that when you're wearing trail runners, you're going to have a harder, more difficult time just because you don't have that amount of support. But trail runners, I know you may ask yourself the question, but they're not waterproof. Suppose you step in a puddle, suppose they get wet, suppose it starts raining, your feet are going to get wet. You know, if it starts raining or anything like that happens, your feet are going to get wet. But the one advantage that the trail runners have over the boots is that they tend to breathe really, really well. And so really easily. So a couple times I've worn these on the trail and it's rained, or I've stepped into a stream or whatever, and yeah, initially I do feel, okay, water is in my shoe. You kind of have to embrace that and realize that they do dry really quickly. You have to stop and dry your feet when you can, of course, if it's not constantly raining. But you typically, honestly, I don't really worry about it anymore. You just kind of deal with it, and your feet, you realize, do dry really fast. Hour at least in the sun, or even not in the sun, as long as you stay dry. It does a nice job kind of wicking the water away from your foot as long as you have a good sock. And it does a nice job kind of making sure that you stay energized while you're on the trail. Another major con is that the soles of trail runners tend not to be as rigid. Granted, they're pretty aggressive treads compared to typical sneakers. But you do have to worry about it not being as rigid. So you do tend to feel more underfoot. And so there's a possibility if you're on very rocky terrain, especially loose rocks, like we were in the Smokies on that third day, I tend to feel a lot more in that third day, especially with those rocks where you're shifting. I don't have to worry about as much ankle support. That's another con for these trail runners, is that you don't have the ankle support that you do with most of those higher ankle hiking boots. So be aware of that. If you're someone who knows you need ankle support, stick to hiking boots. Find one that fits for you. But just be aware there's some other options out there. You don't have to stick to just a boot alone. So, the big question, I kind of showed 3 options that I use. The big question I'm sure you all have is, okay, so those are the 3 options that Tim uses. He has the hiking boots, he has the trail runners, and he has kind of that hiking shoe type of deal, kind of in between. So how do you choose which one is best for you? Something to consider is when you go try your shoe on, I would go at the end of a work day. If you've been on your feet all day, that way your feet kind of already naturally swell during the day. And if you go put on your shoe at that point, you get a better idea of fit. Don't just buy it online. Try your shoe on, wear your hiking socks that you'll be wearing with it. So that way you kind of get a sense of how it will feel, how it fits. And what I try to do is I try to make sure that my thumb can fit between the top of my toe and the end of the boot. For me, that ends up being a half or a full size bigger for hiking than my typical, say, work shoes or general sneakers that I wear. Just because your foot does swell, and especially comes in handy having that extra room for downhill hiking. Because I realized that what happened really quickly on my first trip to the Smokies is I love these boots. Oh, got my shirt dirty. I love these boots, but what happened is that every time I would go downhill, and this is a size 12 boot, is that my toe would just jam into the front of the boot over and over again. And so if I was in flat ground here in Ohio, walking in these, hey, they're perfect all day long. if I go in the Smokies and do some heavy downhill or any mountainous region and go any downhill, I tend to end up with black toenails because it constantly gets bruised by jamming into the front of the boot. So that's something to consider, is make sure, I'd say half to a full shoe size bigger than you think, just because you will need that space. Second thing is that you have to practice in your shoes. You really do. You really have to try to go walking longer than just a few hours in your shoes. That's why I recommend, if you want to buy shoes, I try using REI because they have a really good return policy. And so you get a chance to try your shoe out, and if they create hot spots consistently, you can go ahead and return that shoe and try something else. I think Zappos.com also has a really good return policy. I try them out and see what shoe works for you. You really have to kind of finagle and experiment and see what works. I left the best shoe for last, of course, and it's my Crocs. Now, I will say I use my Crocs a lot more when I had my hiking boots than when I use my trail runners, because my trail runners are pretty comfortable. I feel like I can wear them around camp, but it's still nice to have the Crocs for stream crossings, river crossings, anything where I think my feet possibly get wet, and just to walk around camp. It's just really handy, and so far I haven't been convinced to leave them home as yet. Maybe that day is coming, but I'm not there yet. So Crocs are really good for camp shoes. I really like them. I don't leave them home. Socks. Now, the main thing you think about with choosing your shoe and choosing what kind of socks you wear is you want to make sure you're comfortable. That's the big thing you really want to consider. And that's why you're watching this video, probably to the point that you have, is you're thinking to yourself, I really want to be comfortable. And that's where I found trail runners made me really comfortable. They may not make you really comfortable. Maybe boots are the thing for you. But socks are definitely a part of that system. You got to think about your footwear, your shoes, and your socks like a system. It's not just isolated. It's something where you have to think about how it works. So, for example, at my Letchworth trip, I wore trail runners for the first time. I was trying them out, and my feet hurt a lot. And I was trying to figure out why, and I realized I was wearing socks that were too thick. I was wearing these heavier kind of merino wool type of socks, and it just was not working. My feet just ached, and I realized when I changed to a lighter weight sock that pain went away pretty quickly. And I found out that, oh, so your socks and the thickness of the socks that you're wearing with the shoe does make a huge difference in kind of overall comfort. So since we're on socks, one of the common things that you'll see people wearing or talking about are socks that are kind of a merino wool. And what that does really well is it helps if it ever gets wet. It also does a nice job of making sure that your feet doesn't feel as much friction between your foot and the shoe. And they work very well in the winter, good insulative properties, as well as keeping your feet blister free. But if that doesn't work for you, and I'll say this, it doesn't work as well for me as some other options out there, I'll tell you another option. Another option you have are buying these kind of lightweight, they're called sock liners. And these are made of polyester, and you wear these inside of your wool socks. Let's say you're having blisters and you're trying to figure it out. Try wearing some sock liners. What that does is you have this very thin sock liner inside of your merino wool sock or your hiking sock. And what it does is it helps stop that friction. It gives another point where you have friction between the two pairs of socks instead of between your foot and the shoe or your sock and the shoe. It just adds another point that can help avoid that additional friction point. So what I finally come around to are these socks. And so you saw the merino wool type sock, you saw the sock liner, I tried all that, and nothing really seemed to work very well for me except for these. Ooh, got some. I have 3 kids and a wife, so that's hair. These are called Wright socks. W-R-I-G-H-T socks. And what they are, and I'll leave a link down below, I bought these off of Amazon, is that so I was talking about that sock liner. What this does, it's a double layer sock. And so it kind of does that sock liner and that wool layer, I'm not sure what the outer layer of these are, for you. and so you just don't need to carry 2 separate pairs of socks. The friction is between the 2 layers, and like I said before, not between your foot and the shoe. So these are a winner for me, and hopefully they work well for you too. So guys, hopefully this was helpful for you, and I give you some ideas about what could possibly work for you when you're choosing kind of what shoes, boots, trail runners, sneakers, whatever it is you choose to wear when the time comes, and hopefully as well as socks. Because don't forget socks, or don't undersell socks, because that's really important when you go out there taking care of your feet. So hopefully it was helpful for you. If it was, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Comment down below if you guys have any questions about what shoes you wear while you're backpacking or hiking. Sometimes I think it's helpful to get people some ideas about what shoes are out there, what brands are out there. You can see I love my Salomon shoes, but there are lots of other brands out there. As I mentioned, the Oboz boots before. What brand of shoes do you wear or swear by? And do you have any tips and advice for anyone? Be sure to leave them in the comments down below. We'll get that conversation going there, as well as what your experiences have been. Thanks guys, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Peace.